Hi, everyone. It's Kristi, and I am so grateful for how this community has grown. And I want to make sure that you have time to enjoy it. That's why, starting today, Everyday Sommelier is moving to a bi-weekly rhythm. This gives you space to listen, space to reflect, and live what you've learned in every single glass. Because wine isn't about rushing, it's about connection, conversation, and confidence. So join me now every other week for your dose of wine knowledge and continue to learn wine your way. It's the holidays or New Year's Eve, and you're heading out to yet another party. Without thinking, you grab a bottle of champagne to toast the special occasion. It is the drink of celebrations, right? What if I suggested instead that you pop the cork on your bubbles on a Tuesday or any normal day of the week and simply enjoy it with, say, pizza, potato chips, or a hamburger? Would you call me crazy? Or would my suggestion lead you down a different path of thinking, the one that says, why the heck not? I'll drink champagne any given day. In this episode, my guest, a true champagne aficionado, joins my passionate plea to take bubbles off the pedestal and enjoy them whenever and wherever. His passion for grower champagnes in particular will have you pulling out that bottle that you might just have been saving or for a special occasion and invite a friend or a loved one over to enjoy it with you tonight or any ordinary night. So let's get started. Welcome to Everyday Sommelier, where we make learning about wine approachable, fun, and something you can actually enjoy. I'm your host, Kristi Mayfield. Think of me as your sommelier next door, here to help you cut through the complexity so you can enjoy every glass with confidence and learn wine your way. I'm guilty. I admit it. I have hoarded champagne bottles for years, waiting for the exact perfect moment to pop the cork and celebrate. But why not do so on an everyday Tuesday night? Why has champagne become relegated to the elite, the special, the once-in-a-lifetime moments? Well, let's dive in. My guest today, David Aferiat, a dual French and U.S. national who is founder and CEO of Avid Vines, an esteemed luxury importer. David, you have dedicated your entire career to connecting people with grower champagnes, wines that have real stories. They have real roots. But before we get into that, can we start with the big question, the big elephant in the room? Why do you think champagne, while it's celebrated by many, still feels either intimidating or out of reach for many wine lovers?
Kristi, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with you and to share this stage with your audience and talk about something that very true, near and dear to my heart, and that is bubbles, particularly champagne. So I look forward to an effervescent conversation here. To answer your question about what is it that still holds people back from enjoying champagne, I think it's principally A, price, and B, sometimes this conception that the champagne is so special that I need to save it for that special moment and then balance when that special moment comes by to remember that I should open up champagne without it passing and going, I totally forgot. And so adding that kind of ceremony, adding that kind of pressure to open up or rather to save the bottle for that special occasion. Yes, it's special, but it should be more of a pattern. And right now, I don't think it's part of a pattern.
Why do you think we have those misunderstandings, though? What do you think is making that perception stick, especially here in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the U.S., we are in an age where there are so many other alternatives besides champagne. And wine, in fact, consumption is for the first time in decades trending down. And that's because there's the next generation of people who would otherwise be trying and sampling and tasting and appreciating champagne. They are going to everything from hard seltzer to low calorie beer, to craft beers, to craft artisanal spirits and such. There is no shortage of options that are out there to mark certain occasions. And so it becomes this idea that perhaps, well, champagne is something for, my parents or something for another generation. And so I believe without the right kind of access or the right kind of introduction to champagne in a way that brings it back to away from the way that it's marketed to us now, which is flashy, diamond, bling and luxury, but back to this is a agricultural product made by, in the case of the champagnes that I find, made by farmer. And it says, I put this in a bottle. I think you'll enjoy it. And then it becomes something that's like, wow, this is how I might celebrate a Tuesday instead of like how I might celebrate a wedding or some other significant life event. It turns out that Tuesday is a significant life event because you're alive to enjoy it. So make it happen.
That I so appreciate you mentioning, David, the marketing around especially champagne or traditional method. And a lot of my listeners who are successful professionals, they might be women who navigate business or social spaces or networking spaces. And champagne does feel to them very intimidating. And you do a lot of work to try to dispel that, as you just mentioned. And how have you seen that play out, though, in your work? How would you, for our listener, help them understand champagne from a perspective of confidence or that sparkling wine discovery? Just flip the switch away from what you talked about, diamonds and elite around sparkling wines, to more of the everyday.
I think in most settings for men and women in a networking kind of environment, what's passed around certainly has to be identified first as, is it champagne or is it a sparkling wine of a different origin than champagne, which France, the country, and the region have done a good job of pulling back and owning the name. What I mean is only the agricultural product that is champagne that we serve can only be called champagne if it's from that region of France. That's where champagne comes from. Anything else, even from outside of that region but within France, is called sparkling wine by slightly different variations. Prosecco if it's from Italy, and sparkling wine if it's from any English-speaking California or the like. So, most social events, it's meant to have a little taste of something. It's very rare that it's actually champagne. So just knowing that already is to say, we'll calibrate whether, one, you like it or not, and two, what impact is it going to have on you after one or two glasses the next day? I'm bringing this back to, again, to the champagnes that we look for. We survey and find exclusively those champagnes that are made certified sustainably and or organically, so that the impact on the next day is something we call, no regrets, #no regrets. And in that sense that, you want to enjoy it twice. You want to enjoy it when you pair it with food and you have it in an environment that makes it part of the conversation. And then the next day when you wake up with, no headache. Because of the way it's made, I will say.
And to that point, David, I'd like to see if we could go in a little more depth. Our listener, you've seen many bottles that are very popular, big brands. We know the orange labels and otherwise. And those are well-known global brands of champagne. You've specifically mentioned grower champagne and the unique sensibilities around not only how those grapes are farmed, but also how those wines are made. How does not understanding the difference in how these wines come to fruition potentially rob listeners of that real grower champagne experience? Can you describe what the difference is and how you can understand that from a shopping perspective, a label, to the point you mentioned, to waking up and feeling fabulous the morning after you've celebrated with that bottle on a Tuesday?
Right. Great question. So I guess the best place to start is to understand champagne is to understand scale. And as I said, it's a huge region. It produces a lot, quantity-wise, of product that only gets released if the region itself says this harvest was good, and therefore you can make both vintage and or you can blend this harvest with the rest to make the champagnes. And most champagnes are a blend of years, so non-vintage. But to your point, the mass marketed names that we all know and associate with coming down off a ski slope or on the back page of a magazine or, at a restaurant at some astronomical price is the result of a production system of these large champagne houses that buy the grapes because they don't own enough land to make their own. So they are the buyers of grapes. And there are many farmers in the region that sole purpose is to harvest grapes in order to sell to these large houses. And that is a system that has worked for hundreds of years. At various price points here in the US, what we're drinking is the collective assembly of all these grapes that have been purchased, that were harvested and sold. An owner grower in this mix is simply a farmer with a plot of land who has said, well, I'm not going to sell my grapes to the big houses. I'm going to hold it back and actually put the fourth generation of my name on this bottle and sell it myself. I don't have the big marketing engine. Granted, I don't have this huge, logistical supply chain built, but by golly, I have these grapes and I'm going to put them in a bottle and I'm going to put my own name on it. And those are the conversations that I seek and find, in the region to say, have I got I've got a platform for you. And the Avid Vines platform enables that owner grower to come to America and reach not the mass market by any stretch, but to the select few that are humble means of getting the word out, and our partners providing that access to these farmers. And they still exist. To me, it speaks very deeply to a sense of authenticity, the connection both I have to the country as a citizen, the authenticity of these people who say, I want my name and I want my stamp on this to be shared, and the stories that come with it. And then third is this incredible amount of grit, passion, and perseverance that emanates from these, that, there are lots of people who collect watches, right? And after they get past the big names like a Rolex or a Patek Philippe, you get to they travel to the mountaintop of some Swiss mountain to find that watchmaker, and they craft one watch at a time. This is almost the same thing. It's not meant to be priced astronomically way out. It is meant to say, we bring this in, we bring it to our website, to our partners, and I'm not trying to boil the ocean. I'm just simply through aspects, platforms, and occasions like this one to speak with you and your audience to say there is a better way. And that better way comes all the way down to how it's made. So when farmers are growing to sell their product, they're all about the yield. And Champagne has done a better job of this than others. Owner growers who pay for the certification, which means the audit that comes with it, which is not inexpensive, has a process, an audited process where people come to the property and they watch how many interventions were made during the course of the growth season of these champagnes, which means when there was a issue like a mold or an infestation, how many times did it happen? What did you use to block it? And that's the information we want to know. To those farmers that we find and who have these certifications, they are an audited pledge not to use chemicals like Roundup or so to kill weeds and or spray things on the vines that get expressed eventually into the grape and the wine itself. But it's also neither the use of Miracle Grow equivalents like into the ground, nitrates to boost, it's very nature driven. And the result of none of those interventions and or chemicals expressed in the grapes that get into the wine is often a cleaner reaction to drinking it, which means in our bodies, especially as we age, no reaction to such chemicals, which would give us a histamine reaction, inflammation. And inflammation would mean like a headache. And that's what we mean when we say no regrets.
That's a very nice way of talking through the decision points that a grower or a grower house can make, where a large brand likely doesn't have that same direct connectivity to the vines in the vineyard. And the volume matters in a lot of those cases where you produce millions of bottles every year, and that's what your market expects. So for you, our listener, who wants to start a different champagne discovery journey, something that goes beyond the big brands, the hype, the luxury branding, where would you direct them to begin more of a small brand grower champagne exploration? I know in the US we have the direct to consumer avenue for wineries to sell directly to customers, but we're talking not about the US market. We're talking about, say, champagne. Where would you direct them, David?
If you're on this journey, it helps to know already from this conversation the term owner grower, a grower champagne, someone that makes champagne in this way, a very small batch and such. So that's already helpful. Where and when? Well, if you go to a local wine store, that's great. but local wine stores are subject to distribution, and distributors are subject to finding the right products, and importers such as myself and such. Here's a situation you never want to find yourself in, whether it's champagne or anything else, and that is in the empty aisle of your local grocery store. That right there, you are set yourself up for failure. Why? Because now you're making judgments based on what kind of animals on the label or what kind of price is on the shelf. And you're not setting yourself up for success. How you would be to talk to somebody from a package store or someone with a bit of knowledge who has done the research and tasted around and who gets to know you and your palate and can say, I think I know what you might like. Burgundy lover, here's this, or champagne, here's this. If you're outside of that, and so how do I buy my wines when I'm not buying, when I'm not purchasing wines from champagne houses themselves? I buy a lot of my wine online because I have found the communities and or the clubs and such that I have an email relationship with, and I have no problem with, especially how they set up their delivery to avoid the high heat months and living where you do and living where you can't ship all the time. So I'll buy something, frankly, and note that it's purchased, but I might not see it for 3 or 4 months. And then boom, it's like, oh, Christmas in October, or it arrives when it arrives, or in May. And I mention that because how these wines come to this country deserves a quick mention, right? So it costs a lot of money to ship the wines. We know that. Okay, fine. At Avid Vines, we not only find these organic, certified, sustainably made champagnes, but then we put them on a refrigerated container over the ocean. And only 5% of all the wine from Europe to the US is ever put into such a container. If you can think about it, on every other month, but maybe January and a little bit of February, on the ocean, these temperatures inside these containers can reach astronomically high temperatures. If you were to put flowers or tulips from Holland or a wedding cake in these containers and ship them, you'd have a hot mess when you opened up the door. And yet we expect them to be just fine if they're wine in a bottle. The truth is that sometimes these trip and the temperatures can put and add the wrong elements into a wine from their reaction that is very hard to come off of or mitigate. There is no way that we would be able to put these delicate wines without these stuff that's either added or stuff that's put on the vines and such that we would ever want to see in a container that wasn't refrigerated at like 65 or 60 degrees. And that is meant to protect it over its most vulnerable part of the journey, which is over the ocean. Once it gets into the country, there are refrigerated trucks that take it. If you were to order it from our website or from even others online that you find, they'd pick the shoulder months or other months besides the intense heat to send it. And it's okay if it spends a day or two at a slightly elevated temperature when it arrives. As long as you take it, put it in a dark place, and or put it into a wine refrigerator, you'll be just fine. Because the majority of the 6 weeks that it's on the water, it has not been brutalized from the temperature.
Yes, and I have stories upon stories upon stories of importers who have experienced unforeseen delays or import issues at dock, and those wines sit in the containers you're talking about for unprecedented amounts of time in the middle of summer. And you just pray that what comes out on the back end isn't just a complete loss. So that is a great topic to bring up. And it is, we think about the risks around Champagne. Of course, I always think about hail because the Champagne region is prone to hailstorms, so that can be lost. You talk about the fact that the growers are not using herbicides and pesticides, so they're a little bit more at the mercy of Mother Nature to not create those negative impacts on the vines themselves. So again, those layers of risks, but we often forget the transportation risk that you so eloquently pointed out.
It's not a 1 or a 0. It's not like total loss from temp, but it is a subtle taste. And here's breaking it all down. And everyone knows this intuitively, especially if you've had and been privileged to visit a winery itself, whether in California or in another country. Wine always tastes better where it's made, right? And it's not just because you're on vacation or you're smelling lavender in the air, or it's literally because the wine hasn't traveled to get to your glass the way it travels to get to the US. It tastes different when you're at home or at a restaurant than when you are at the vineyard. So we all know this intuitively. And we're just describing right now as to the subtle reasons why. And it's not because it's been boiled, but it's just, it has been under stress when it's not shipped in a refrigerated container. And so that stress can just diminish it ever so slightly at the margin where we're thinking. And that's where we're describing.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's really, really important. So I'd like to take a little segue back in time, back in history. David, with your knowledge of champagne, can you share your thoughts around how did champagne become so prestigious? How did it become the wine of noble courts or high stakes political dinners or celebrations, as we started off our discussion talking about? How did it get there?
Well, to understand most wine, and certainly champagne, is to understand history. And if you're a student of history with all of its stories and reactions, discoveries, accidents, and so forth, champagne fits right in there. And if you go to France, if you're privileged enough and have the good fortune to go to France, I encourage you to go to these big houses whose names you know and you've had here in the US, because they do a fantastic job in English and in French of explaining how champagne is made, their origin story, and it's hugely beneficial, the context. And it's like Disneyland, and it's only 40 minutes away by train from Paris. So it's a great day trip. It is something to see. It's history. It is everything. The only other thing to do that is, if you go deeper, is to then, send me an email or connect with me, and I will give you the names and addresses of these smaller owner growers. They don't speak English all that well, but you can get a lot communicated across opening champagne and tasting and swirling around and appreciating it together. That's not a problem. But it is great to go see a larger house and understand how it's made before going to a smaller house and saying, okay, now I get some idea of what you do and how is it different? Okay, great. And so, having said that, the history of champagne, we all know. In these houses, they'll tell you their story, but the actual origins come from a monk living in a monastery in the Champagne region of France back in 1600 or so. And this was in the monastery, that dames of the day, that the brothers, Dom Perignon, that accidentally fermented wine in the bottle, and at some point the pressure that built knocked the cork off, and he came down and was like, "What is this? What have I done? What a mistake!" And he tasted it, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, guys, come quickly! I'm drinking stars. I don't know what happened here, but this is great." And so, okay, from that they started to say, "Well, this is yet another very interesting way to make wine." And they perfected it. It's interesting because how it got into, Napoleon took champagne into battle, and he would say, there's a famous quote that says, "Look, I go into battle and I'm drinking champagne. But if I win, it's to celebrate the victory. If I lose, it's to nurse the loss. But either way, I'm drinking champagne." And in terms of state dinners and politicians, most state dinners will serve California sparkling wine. I think Schaumburg is probably the one that stands out, the most. And I think only Reagan was one of the presidents who was like, "California sparkling for everybody, but I have a bottle of champagne here behind my chair, and this is what I'm drinking." So that's my quick history of champagne.
That's great. It does have a magical aura around it, and I think a lot of that is why we do put it in that loftier celebratory or high importance arena rather than pulling it out. We keep talking about Tuesday nights. I guess it could be a Wednesday or a Monday for that matter. So David, we've talked about some of the origins. We've talked about the differences between the larger labels and the growers. But if you could wrap up with 5 top tips for the listener to expand either their knowledge, their access, or even just how they incorporate champagne or other prestigious sparkling wines into their wine journey, what are some of your top tips that you would share?
Okay. So I shared one of them, right? Never buy wine in an empty grocery store aisle. That's the big one. 2, I also mentioned this one in passing. Don't buy critter wine, which is what? Don't buy anything with an animal on the label. It's just some marketing committee got around and said, let's put a panda or let's put a kangaroo. And then it short circuits all your thinking. You're like, oh, it's so adorable. It's got to taste good. Don't do that. The third is, as it relates to champagne, take champagne off of the pedestal. What does that mean? That means take it off of its celebratory special occasion and bring it into a Tuesday or a Monday night. And what I mean by that is bring it from a cocktail. Champagne, it's often we walk around, we think of the networking. And so it is not a cocktail. I mean, at least not the grower champagne that I import. These champagnes are the perfect, and I mean the perfect pairing to almost any dish that you can serve. It is the more than forgiving. It's a chameleon. It will adapt and show you flavors and will adhere to literally any plate and dish that you make. Champagne and Korean barbecue takeout, match made in heaven. Champagne and Indian food, the curries, the masala galam, I mean, unbelievable pairing. Unbelievable pairings. I will serve champagne with Wagyu steak. And simply because for this reason, I'm an amateur chef, I love to cook, and I do think about menu planning. Champagne is unique in that it is effervescent and it's acidic. And what is that? There's lots of wines that have acidity too, but in terms of champagne, the acidity is what makes it pair with almost anything. And we have something called palate fatigue, which is the 10th bite of my steak, my Wagyu steak or prime rib or something, is never as good as that first bite. But if I drink champagne in between bites, the acidity is like wiping my tongue clean. So the 10th bite is almost like what my first bite is. And so that taken all the way through a pairing in a meal is why champagne is so excellent to pair with, because it's like, cleaning the palate. We're all having a great time, and it's matching with the flavors. And then it's preparing you for yet another bite as if it were the first time. It's rather incredible. So that's maybe 3 or 4 is just, we say in Avid Vines, these wines are not meant for the special occasion. You are the occasion. So open up the damn bottle. Now, and again, it just means like, take a more relaxed approach to not saving this for that special occasion. But I'm telling you, when you drink some of these champagnes and you pair it with,
potato chips.
I mean, potato chips, it's a full meal. I mean, think of like but just pair it with like Chinese or Thai or Indian food or, my goodness, it takes on a whole other level of enjoyment.
Couldn't agree more, David. That is, I think, probably the key takeaway is we put it on a pedestal. I don't know when it moved from something you drink every day, which I don't think it's ever really been that, to this elevated, lofty magic stars in a bottle. And I am a huge proponent of pulling it out and, hey, keep a bottle in your refrigerator so it is easy for you to access. Have it chilled, have it ready. So when you order pizza, you can pop that cork and enjoy it any given day of the week.
I would say the only addendum to that is, champagne that comes in half bottles and stuff, it's not the best format or expression of champagne. So the 750 milliliter is appropriate. The Magnum is probably even the best, but the perfect size is 750, which means champagne should be shared. So it is a drink that if you share that, if you have and serve it with a meal and you drink these champagnes that we import in, there's a guarantee you will not have a headache. I'm not responsible for what you drink after the champagne, but share it, pair it with food, and you will not have a headache the next day.
I think we need to start a movement, whether it's bubbles on Monday or magic stars in your bottle on Wednesday, but get some type of sparkling wine, champagne and all in your glass any given day of the week. And I truly agree with you that it does pair perfectly. So if ever in doubt, that's the best food and wine pairing tip we can give. If in doubt, pull the bubbles out.
Ooh. Very good.
Well, David, this has been such a pleasure. I've really learned a lot, and I think our listener now has the tools that they need to understand the difference between the big brands and grower champagnes, and that can make all the difference in your journey of really exploring. People think all champagne tastes the same. I can truly tell you, and I know you would agree, it does not. So just as you can go explore all different varietals, go explore all different champagnes, and you will have a magical journey of your own.
It's been a pleasure, Kristi. Thank you so much.
If you love this show and have a friend who would also appreciate the cultural context of champagne and want to sip a bottle with you on a Tuesday night, please do me a favor and share this episode with them. Because we all know sharing wine and wine stories with friends is the absolute best way to go. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Kristi Everyday Sommelier. That's Kristi Everyday Sommelier. And in our next episode, we're going to continue to explore sparkling wine and trace a bottle of sparkling wine step by step through the intricate process of creating those magic little bubbles we all love so much. But this time with a twist, a true Texas twist. Now, until then, grab your favorite glass of bubbles while you learn wine your way.